All right. I heard that this man, he wanted to go on vacation, take his family on vacation, so he chose the Holy Land. Anybody ever been to the Holy Land? Anybody? A few people, you've been to the Holy Land? It was him and his two children, his wife, and this will tell you how kind of a man he was. They invited his mother-in-law to go with him. So a really good man. And they get to the Holy Land, they're having a great time, the Holy Land, but the mother-in-law suddenly passes away, which is, causes them very distraught, don't know what to do, and how do we get the body back to the States, or how do we bury her here? So they go to the funeral home, and the funeral home director is working with them and says, well, here's your two options. You can send her body back to the States for $5,000, or you can have her buried here in the Holy Land for $200. And to him, that was like a no-brainer. And for the funeral director, it was a no-brainer. And so the man's like, he's scratching his head, he don't know what to do, what decision to make. He said, can you give me like 10 minutes? I'll go out in the hallway and just kind of think about this. And he goes out in the hallway, he paces, and he's scratching his head, trying to figure out, do I send my mother-in-law's body back to the States for $5,000, or do I bury her here in the Holy Land for $200? So he finally thinks he gets the answer, what he thinks he ought to do, and he goes back into the room, the consultation room, and he talks to the director, and he says, I've decided what I'm going to do. I think I'm going to have her body flown back to the United States. And the guy's like, what in the world? Why would you do that? Why would you fly her body back to the United States for $5,000 when you could have her body buried here in the Holy Land for $200? He said, well, I kind of figured this out. When I was in Sunday school, I heard a story about a man that died 2,000 years ago, and he came back to life 3 days later. And I can't take that risk. Now look, you know that's funny. You know that's funny. And by the way, I've got a great relationship with my mother-in-law, or I had a great relationship with my mother-in-law. She's here in this room somewhere, and if you're here with your mother-in-law, you might just want to look straight ahead at this time. No, this is what we're here to celebrate, and I'm so grateful. I'm grateful because last year at this time, I wasn't able to be here with you. Driving up here to the church, it's like, thank you, Jesus, that I get to be here, and just the experience that I had with Jesus during that time and what he taught me, and to walk in faith and to trust. But it's so good to be able to celebrate the foundation of our faith together. There's something about the electricity, is something about the energy that we bring together, and we get to see. We are here to celebrate the resurrection of Christ, and one of the things that I appreciate about the authors that wrote about just the first followers of Jesus was that how real they portrayed them, that they didn't make them better than they were. I mean, think about this. The authors of the New Testament, they're writing about, say, 30 years after the resurrection. 30 years after the resurrection. And the reason why they're starting to write this down is because they're dying off. And at first they thought, we don't need to write this down because Jesus is going to come back during our lifetime and we'll be gone. But they started to see other people, other friends dying off their age, and they figured, we better start writing this information down so that it can be preserved. Now, I would think that they would be tempted after 30 years to write themselves in the story better than what they did. Because if you read any of the New Testament and you read about the first followers of Jesus, you see where they are portrayed as dull people. They don't always get it. They're always kind of fighting with one another. They're denying, betraying, sleeping on Jesus? Why do you write yourself into the story that you want to create a movement with? This is not how you write yourself in the story. You want to write yourself in the story as a superhero. I mean, I know that's what we have a tendency of doing. You go back to situations where you had difficult times in life. It was tough. You were up and down on emotions, and you were not trusting, and you were filled with anxiety, and you were out of control, and you eventually come out of that, and then you get to a place maybe 5-10 years later where you're telling that story again. Sometimes we don't always portray ourselves in the way that we were really experiencing. We like to portray ourselves in a way that we didn't sweat it. We didn't sweat it. We were trusting the whole time. We were brave. We were courageous. It's like you're You're with somebody and they're telling the story and they're like, I didn't sweat not getting the job. And you're like, yes, you did. You were filled with anxiety. You were calling me. Or someone was like, if they would have talked, if they would have said one more word to me, one more word to my wife, I was about to stand up and give them a piece of my mind. And you're like, no, you weren't. You wouldn't have done that. You were looking for a door out, because we have a tendency to write ourselves into times that were very difficult. We like to paint ourselves a little bit better. We like to write ourselves into the story better. But the authors of the New Testament, they didn't do that. They wrote them as if they were on the wrong side of the bell curve. They weren't the brightest group. Why do they do that? Because that's exactly how they were. I think about some difficult times. Go back, many of us, if not most of us, can think about 2017 Hurricane Harvey. Anybody? Yeah. I think about those, and I would like to go back and tell a story. If I'd write about that story and try to save that history as much detail as I can, I might go back in that story and portray myself better than I am. But I remember some of those moments. I remember my family being boated out. I stayed at the house. We still had electricity. I stayed there. And I thought the rains had stopped. I thought we had escaped any of the water coming into our house. And I'm sitting at our bar about 10:30 p.m. one night. Don't know what day that was. And I look behind me, and water's trickling underneath the door. And I'm like, because we don't have insurance. And we spent a lot of our life trying to build up collateral in the home and trying to be wise with our money. And I'm like, now. See, I'd like to go back to that story and like to say, I looked at that water and I was like, God, you got this. I did. And then you think about our own church. This building wasn't here. We had dirt delivered. There was a pad here, but our church over there received 4.5 feet of water. Literally almost like swim in that water. I like to go back and go, you know what? I thought God, I didn't have any anxiety, any worry, any concern. Others like, God, you got this, but that's not what it was. We didn't have service for 3 to 4 weeks. We were a nomadic church. We were borrowing churches and borrowing buildings from other people. And we didn't have, it's like, how's the money going to come in? How are we going to pay the staff? How are we going to pay for this new facility that we're having? And how are we going to pay for the facility there? And each week we would come in and Tammy and Regina would say, hey, we got 3 or 4 checks from this church. And it was a church from churches all over the United States. And I was like, okay, I'd build my faith. But then Monday would come again and I would feel that anxiety rising up. I'd like to tell you that I was that person who said, you know what? I don't have any anxiety over this. God's got this. But what I am impressed with on the New Testament is that when they write about, and particularly the time after he died and before his resurrection, they don't write them in as these people who were like, let's go take the world for Jesus. No, they write them like Thomas. I'm not going to believe. They write them about the other disciples that are locked behind doors. They look at people who, like 2 people on a road that's traveling, and say that those people are leaving Jerusalem headed back home, or at least to Emmaus, and they're very, very sad. We don't think about that time between the death of the burial, and the moment before he rose. What are they doing? And I'm telling you what they're doing. You know what we think they're doing? We think they're gathered around the tomb ready for a resurrection, but they're not. We think they're like, okay, this is the 3rd day. Let's get around the tomb. Let's get a countdown clock going, and it'd be a great time, 10, 9, 8. And in our day, we'd have our phone out. We'd be live. We'd have somebody live. We would be posting on social. We would have our church merch on. We would be like, won't he do it? Or I'm back, baby, or something. We would be ready. And we think in some of our minds that that's exactly how the disciples were, because we know the story from Pentecost on. We see after they receive the Holy Spirit, they're stepping up, and Peter's preaching a fiery sermon, and thousands of people are coming to faith. But what about the days before that? We don't see that because we don't think about that. We think about the people that basilicas are named after and colleges are named after, and these great, but there was a time where it wasn't really known what was going to happen. So why would they portray that? Because that's exactly how the first followers were like. And I actually appreciate that, because I can identify better with your weaknesses and many times than your strengths. I identify with the weaknesses of people that we would call now great men of faith. Like, I know you doubt. I doubt myself sometimes and saying, how could I be a great man of faith? And I know my thoughts. I know my life. And yet I see people like this, and I only see their greatness, then it kind of dissuades, it kind of discourages me. But when I see that men of God and women of God like this went through trials, and they went through questions and doubts. Maybe could we say reconstruction? Maybe reconstruction during that time. Is he going to do what he said he's going to do? Is he really who he said he was? And going and wrestling through, I can relate with that. I mean, Luke tells us, I love Luke's account of this because Luke is a physician. He's got an eye for detail, and he writes the details. As you read his book, you can read details. And he says in Luke 24, verse 1, but on the first day of the week at early dawn, they went to the tomb, taking spices that they had prepared. And when he talks about they, it's like 3 women plus a group of women. You got Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and there's other women there. And it says that they go there the first day of the week. They go down to the tomb, and they're taking spices. And the question is, why are they taking spices? They're not taking spices for a person that they're expecting to be alive. They're taking burial spices to prepare a body that they're expecting to be dead, because nobody expected to find no body at the tomb. They all expected going with burial spices. And Luke says, and they found the stone rolled away from the tomb, but when they went in, they did not find the body of the Lord Jesus. They was sure when they saw that stone rolled away, they would have thought, foul play, I would have think. And while they were perplexed about this, behold, 2 men stood by them in dazzling apparel. Perplexed simply means they're at a loss. They're at a loss. Verse 5, and as they were frightened and bowed their faces to the ground, the men said to them, why do you seek the living among the dead? And I'm not putting, I am putting words in their mouth. I'm thinking they're saying, we're not trying to seek the living among the dead. We're trying to seek the dead among the dead, because we saw him die. We saw you guys put him here, and we've come with these spices right here to prepare his body. And they come back and say, he's not here. He has risen. Remember how he told you? It's like they're painting themselves in a way that's like they're not the brightest. Remember how he told you while he was still in Galilee that the Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinful men and crucified on the third day, or crucified, and on the third day he'll rise. But they didn't get it. There was a window of time that it didn't click with them, because sometimes when you're in it, some of you guys might be in it right now and understand that it's hard to get it sometimes to remember the promises of God, sometimes hard to remember that he'll never leave, he'll never forsake, he will prepare, he will provide, he will be whatever you need him to be. And when you're in it, let's all agree, let's just all come to the conclusion and say sometimes we struggle with that, with our emotions. Verse 8 says, and they remembered his words. And returning from the tomb, they told all the things to the 11 and to all of the rest. Well, we say, oh, so they're coming back and they're telling the 11 and the rest of the disciples what they just experienced. And we're sure they're about to throw a party. We're sure they're about to be super excited. Now, it was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary, the mother of James, and the other women with them who told these things to the apostles. But these words seemed to them as what? An idle tale. It means foolishness, foolish talk, nonsense. Seemed like an idle tale, and they did not believe them. But these words seemed to them as an idle tale, and they did not believe them. So, a little bit about Luke. Luke is a detailed writer, right? He's a physician. He's looking for details. Luke is not one of the 12, was not one of the 12. And here's what he writes from the very beginning of the book, and people would have known this, but he wanted the person that he was writing to know why he's writing. So we're going to go back 23 chapters to the very beginning of Luke 1, just to read about what he says about his book. He says in verse 1, inasmuch as many have undertaken to compile a narrative of the things that have been accomplished among us. Like many people have been writing about this. Just as those who from the beginning were eyewitnesses and ministers of the word have delivered them to us. It seemed good to me also, having followed all things closely for some time past, to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus, that you may have certainty concerning the things that you have been taught. Right, so he wants you to know the good, bad, the ugly. And I'm so glad that he put chapter 24 in there to show us that there were the ladies that were first followers of Jesus that came to the tomb on the third day, but they didn't come expecting a resurrection. They came expecting a dead body because they had burial spices ready to prepare the body as their tradition would have them. And then we catch up in verse 13. It's like he changed the story. He doesn't change the story. He continues the story, but he goes to a different setting, into a different scene where it says that very day, two of them were going to a village named Emmaus. It's about 7 miles from Jerusalem. A village named Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. Now, I'm thinking that Luke, I think this is correct, that Luke was like, to get his accounts and to get his narrative down, to get his story down, he interviewed people. Just like if they would, you watch a documentary about an event like 9/11, and there would be many people interviewed about where they were at certain times during the event to get a comprehensive view of the situation. And this is what he's done. He would have probably talked to Mary Magdalene to get the story that we went down to the tomb on the day that he was supposed to rise, or the day that he was going to rise, and we were going to treat his body, and this is what happened. But he would also met with these two guys as well to get this story. They're followers and disciples of Jesus, but they're not a part of the 12. So it's a 7-mile journey from Jerusalem to Emmaus, 7 miles from here to, let's just say, from here, if you start walking like you're going to Port Arthur, that would be St. Elizabeth, right? Right, that's about 7 miles. If you're headed out to Hardin County, that would be Good Ground Coffee right over there. We had good people over there, go see them. Good Ground Coffee would be about 6.8 tenths of a mile. So that's just to give you a reference to how far these guys are walking, right? They're walking everywhere. Like we mentioned Jesus walking everywhere. Last week we talked about him riding a donkey. But these guys would have had calves like boom, like boom. They were like walking everywhere. 7 miles for these guys probably would have been nothing. And it says as they were walking, verse 14, they were talking with each other about all these things that happened. And we say, well, what are all these things that are happening? Well, here's the things that were happening. They went to Jerusalem. They arrested Jesus, their leader. They treated him harshly. They whipped him. They crowned him. They put him on a cross. He died. They watched him put his body in a tomb. That's the things that they would have been talking about that had happened. And while they were talking and discussing together, and the Greek word for that means while they were examining or debating with each other about what happened. So probably like trying to give in their own philosophies about, no, this is what happened. This is what I saw, or this is what I think is going to happen. As they were talking or examining and debating, Jesus himself drew near with them, but their eyes were kept from recognizing him. Jesus draws near to them, but their eyes were kept from recognizing him. Now, this is one thing that I was thinking. Jesus, why are you going to show up on this road with them? Like, if I had a week like Jesus had, am I going to look for two people on a road heading 7 miles down the road? No, I'm going to Rayburn, right? I'm going to the beach. I'm going to get some R&R. I'm going to get my family together, or at least I'm going to walk down the streets and look at the Roman guards and like point to myself. I'm not going to be seeking out somebody else. He's always calling people to be his followers, but now you see that he's going out and he's following other people. It says, but their eyes were kept from recognizing him. I'm not sure why their eyes would have been kept from recognizing him, other than if he had what was called a glorified body, a different body, which we would think that we're going to have something different than what we have right now when we die, when we go to heaven. But we do know that there were many people that didn't recognize Jesus. It's in the accounts. And he said to them, I love this because Jesus is going to play a little bit dumb here. He's going to have some Jesus fun. He says, what is this conversation that you're holding with each other as you walk? And they stood still looking sad. So they're walking and Jesus is like, what are you guys talking about? And like they stop. And Luke wants you to know, so specific, so detailed, that they stopped and they looked sad. Well, yeah, so here's the story that we've got so far. Two people going from Jerusalem to Emmaus, and they're very frustrated. They're debating with each other about what has happened. Jesus joins their journey, but they don't recognize him. Now I wondered as I was thinking about this for myself, I wonder how many times that Jesus has tried to join your journey, but you didn't recognize him. Maybe he ain't showing up exactly like what you thought he was supposed to do, but he joined your journey. He joined your 7-mile, sad, disgusted, frustrated, Jesus didn't meet my needs or my expectations, but yet he still joins it, but we're not able to see that because it's not exactly what we thought it was going to look like. And he just says, hey, what are you talking about? He says they stand still, they look sad. Why are they sad? Why not look sad? They're frustrated. What they have invested themselves in, what they thought to be their hope for life is done. It is over. And it's hard for us to jump into those shoes in that window of time to say that is how they would have felt at that moment. But that is what they felt, because there's no category for resurrections. There's no category. There's like nothing on the map about resurrections. Even though he told them that he would die and he would rise, it's still no category. And so for them, the world has ended, and it's unmet expectations. And say, well, now we can jump in on that journey right now, unmet expectations, because it's not uncommon. Let's say from a pastor's perspective, and I know there's plenty of people in here that you'd share this sentiment, is that you have unmet expectations with Jesus, and he didn't meet your expectations, therefore you're not sure about it. We have people that have said to me, like, I no longer go to church. I no longer, like, I'm kind of following from a distance, even if they would consider it a distance. I follow from a distance because, actually, I prayed that they would get healed, and they died. Right? That's a 7-mile journey right there. Just talking about it. I thought you were going to heal my dad. I can tell you about that prayer. I prayed the same prayer. My dad passed away with pancreatic cancer, 6 months. But I prayed. I had talks with God in my backyard. Respectful talks, honest talks. Some of you, we have people come in to praise, and their marriage is on the rocks. They come in thinking that they get into church, their marriage is going to stay together, and they don't. And then 2 or 3 weeks later, you don't see either one. Because there's unmet expectations. If I do this, then Jesus, you're on the hook to do this. There's unmet expectations. And then there's just tragedy that happens in a lot of our lives. We all tell the story. And in that, we're like, hey, God, I follow you, and these things are not supposed to be happening in my life, because if I follow you, this is how it is supposed to line out in my life. And we all have those moments to go, if you were good, why would this happen? Or if you were God and all-powerful, why would you allow these things to be happening? We all have the same conversations, maybe not to somebody else that these guys are having, but that's the same conversation. They stand still and they're sad because they can't get over the fact that this is how it was supposed to be, but now this is what they saw, and now this is the reality in their life, and they don't know exactly what to do about it. And it says, then one of them, named Cleopas. We don't know the name of the other person. Luke just didn't bother to put the other person's name in it. But we know Cleopas, and we call him Cleo from this point on, answered him, are you, talking to Jesus, the only visitor to Jerusalem that does not know the things that's happened in these days? And Cleo's getting a little mouthy. And he said to them, Jesus is playing some Jesus games. What things? What things? Tell me. And they said to him, concerning Jesus of Nazareth. Now Cleo is starting to tell Jesus about Jesus. He was a man that was a prophet, mighty indeed. Oh, really? Tell me more. And word before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and rulers delivered him up to be condemned to death. Oh, really? What did they do next? They crucified him. And then Cleo says, but we had hoped. We'd hoped. We had these expectations that you were supposed to do this, that God was supposed to do this, and he didn't do it. We had hoped. He was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all of this, it is now the 3rd day since these things happened. Now, I'm telling you, if I was Jesus, I would get a little mouthy. Because when the moment they said it's the 3rd day, I said, did he tell you anything about the 3rd day? Along the way, these past 3 years, did he happen to mention, is there anything special that's going to, but Jesus was Jesus. He was cool here. He refrained. He didn't say anything. But I would have been tempted to say that. And then he says, moreover, this is Cleo talking, some women of our company amazed us. They were at the tomb early in the morning, talking about this morning. And when they did not find his body, they came back saying that they had even seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. Some of those who were with us, and this makes me believe that Cleo and his buddy were with the disciples early in the morning before they started on their trek to Emmaus, because some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but him they did not see. And he said to them, "Oh, foolish ones and slow of heart," this is Jesus speaking, "to believe all the prophets have spoken. Was it not necessary for Christ to suffer?" Like, was it not mandatory? And we go like, why? What is the why behind the death of Christ? Like, some people say that's just divine child abuse from God. God's not good because he would require his son to die. No, we say God is so good and Jesus is so good because he would do what is, from his own words would say, was it not necessary, Jesus speaking, that the Christ should suffer these things and enter into his glory? And then Jesus, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them in all the scriptures the things concerning himself. So they drew near to the village to which they were going. Right? They're getting close to Emmaus. And he acted, Jesus is having Jesus games again. He acted if he was going farther, but they urged him strongly, saying, "No, stay with us, for it is towards evening, and the day is now far spent." So when he went in to stay with them, when he was at the table with them, he took bread, he blessed it, and he broke it, and he gave it to them. Now Jesus is the guest on this trip. And now they have turned, Cleo and the companion has turned Jesus, the guest, into the host, right? It's like you ask somebody to pray over the meal when they come over to your house. I don't know that that's real kosher. I don't know that that's really a good idea, right? I like to play. I have three girls, 2 teenagers and 1 10 years old. And so when they have their friends over the house and we're having a meal, I just like to watch their reaction. I'll go, "Becky, would you pray over the food?" I put my head down, and they're like, freaking out, right? It's like next time you have a guest over your house, and just ask them to pray over the food and see how that goes. It's fun to watch the reaction, but it's exactly what they did to Jesus. And it says that Jesus took the bread, he blessed it, and he broke it, and he gave it to them. Look at verse 31. And their eyes were opened, and they recognized him. You're like, look, he's been on a 7-mile journey with you, and you haven't recognized him. He's told you everything from Moses all the way through the Old Testament. And you didn't know it was him. But when he takes the bread, he prays over it, he breaks it, and he gives it to you. You recognize him. And then Jesus pulls another Jesus juke. He vanishes from their sight. Verse 32, and they said to each other, "Did not our hearts burn within us while he talked to us on the road, while he opened to us the scriptures?" And they rose that same hour, and they returned to Jerusalem. When you think about that, 7 miles. They just walked 7 miles. Now they're turning around and walking 7 miles back. And they found the 11 and those who were with them, and they gathered together, saying, "The Lord has risen indeed." The Lord has risen indeed. The Lord has risen indeed. He's appeared to Simon. And then they told what had happened on the road and how he was known to them in the breaking of bread. So it says that when he prayed over the bread, he broke the bread and he handed the food, that their eyes were open. And we may read a lot into this, but I think it could be very, very true. As some have said that he's praying over the food. He takes the bread, he breaks the bread, and he gives the bread. I don't know. Could be. Is it speculation? Yeah, it's speculation. But it makes sense. Why don't they recognize him on the journey? But when he breaks the bread, hands the bread, does he not see what used to be wounds that were for them now are scars? And so they like, wow. And then Jesus, he just disappears. He vanishes from their sight. And they go, did our hearts not burn within us as he was walking alongside us? I love the fact that Jesus enters their journey where they are. It's a sad journey for them. It's a frustrating journey for them. But Jesus enters that and works with them in a way that eventually they will say, he's risen indeed. Now, I'm going to speak for myself, and I speak this over my prayer this week for you, is that, yeah, it's easy and it's great, and we should do it. Come on Easter Sunday and say, he is risen indeed. But my prayer is when I'm on my 7-mile journey, I still want to say, he's risen indeed. Because I know I've got some 7-mile journeys ahead of me. I know life is life. And some of you right now might be on a 7-mile journey where things didn't work out exactly what you thought it was going to be. But the key thing is will your faith go deep enough for you to say, he's risen indeed. Not just when it feels really good. I want my belief and faith in Jesus and what he has done, his death, his burial, and his resurrection to bleed over in those moments where you wake up and go, if you don't go before me, I'm not going to make it today. If you don't walk into this marriage, it's not going to be preserved. If you don't come alongside me today, I'm not going to have peace of mind or the joy of the Lord. And I want you and I want me that on those 7-mile journeys where it's sad and frustrated and unexpected to be able to say from this point on until you stand before Christ, no, he's risen indeed. So what does that mean? I mean, what would that mean to be able to say that? Well, what that would mean, I thought, trying to think from the perspective of someone who's not a believer to say, well, what does the resurrection really do for you? Like, how does that help you now? Because believers, here's what we believe. We believe that the cross of Christ, that on the cross, Jesus bore our sins because we could not work our way to heaven. And we're not good enough to make ourselves right with God. We would just keep sinning. So a perfect person had to take on our imperfections and bear it upon himself to be a worthy sacrifice before God. Like there's justice had to be served. So we understand that to be made right with God, Christians would say, this is how it affects me now. My sins are forgiven. There's no divide between me and God. But what else would it help you with? Well, I think about it like this. The cross of Christ shows that Jesus was willing to get in the fire with me. Right? I like to say it like this. You might not be taken out of the fire. He may not take you out of the fire, preserve you from the fire, 3 Hebrew children, but he'll always get in the fire. And that's what the cross and the burial and the resurrection tells me. It tells me my sins are forgiven. And that can bring me joy, and that I don't have to work for that. I can't work. I can't earn my salvation, but he's done it for me. Second thing is he's got in the fire. He's in the fire with me. And though it's hot, he'll be there right beside me. But the third thing is that to give us hope for one day, when we are with him, there is a day Scripture talks about where he will make all things new. Where even, that's hard to believe. As one author said, all bad things will come untrue. All bad things will come untrue. Almost like, Tim Keller compares it to a nightmare, that if you wake up in the middle of the night as if something has happened to your family, and when you wake up, it's real, and you go in the rooms to see if anything happened, and once you see that nothing's happened and everybody's safe, you go, and it's like when everything bad had come untrue, and that the moment that you found out that it wasn't true, you had greater joy thinking that something bad could have happened, something bad did happen, but that it didn't, and now the joy and the relief of like finding your keys, finding your cell phone, when you find it, you so much more appreciate that. You appreciate that moment because everything bad has come untrue. I want to read, I know I've read a lot tonight. By the way, you can tell all of your friends you read all of Luke 24 today. Someone say, it is not a good idea to read so much Scripture on Easter. And I'm like, that's all we got. I love the story. In a book called Rich Wounds by David Mathis, I want to read this because I think this is super encouraging and super instructive about the resurrection for us today. He says, but what now of his passion? What of his excruciating agony at Golgotha? Yes, as C.S. Lewis said, The dawning of the resurrection age will turn even that agony into glory. Now joy has triumphed over sorrow. Day finally has dominion over night. Light has thrashed against the darkness and won. Christ, through death, has destroyed the one who had power over death. Death is swallowed up in victory. Easter has become our annual dress rehearsal for that great day coming, when our perishable bodies will put on the imperishable, when the mortal will finally put on immortality, when we will join in the triumph song with the prophets and the apostles that says, "O death, where is your victory? O death, where is your sting?" Just as rehearsing the details of Jesus' final days leading up to the cross prepares us for the fiery trials coming on us, so also Easter Sunday, or Saturday, he didn't write that, readies us for the triumph that will follow. Easter is our foretaste of glory divine. Christ has been raised. Daylight is no longer fading to black, but night is awakening to brightness. Darkness is not suffocating the sun, but light is chasing away the shadows. Sin is not winning, but death is swallowed up in victory. Even agony will turn to glory. But Easter doesn't suppress our pain. I love how honest he is. It doesn't suppress our pain. It doesn't minimize your loss, my loss. It bids our burdens stand as they are, in all of their weight, with all of their threats. And this risen Christ, with the brilliance and indestructible life in his eyes, says, "These two I will claim in the victory. These two will serve your joy. These two, even these, I can make an occasion for rejoicing. I have overcome, and you will more than conquer." Easter is not an occasion to repress whatever ails us and put on a happy face. Rather, the joy of Easter speaks remedy to the pains that plague us. Whatever loss you lament, whatever burden weighs you down, Easter says it will not always be that way. The new age has begun. Jesus has risen, and the kingdom of the Messiah is here. He has conquered death and sin and hell. He is alive and on his throne, and he is putting your enemies, all your enemies, under his feet. I love when he says, Easter says, it will not always be this way for you. That one day, what's called the renewal of all things will be made new. Why would you believe that? You say, that's hard to believe. It's hard for me to believe. The reason why I believe it is because Jesus said it. Why do I believe what Jesus says? Because I believe he was resurrected from the grave. And if there's a man that can predict his death and his subsequent resurrection, I'm going with that man. He might know something that he's talking about. And one day, every tear will be wiped away. And one day, every weight that has been and is right now carried in this room will be undone. And just like waking up from a nightmare and you realize it's not true, there's going to be a moment where all of it's going to come untrue. And it's all going to be new from that point on. He's risen. He's risen. He's risen. He's risen indeed. Just to be very explicit with this, my prayer for you has been that on your 7-mile journey, whenever that is, and if it's now, that when Jesus shows up, you'll have eyes to see. You'll have eyes to see. And that as you walk and talk, maybe even debate and discuss, and stop, and get mouthy, that at some point along the way, that you'll be able to have that moment where you'll say, he's risen. He's risen indeed. And that will inform the rest of your life and how you can live. Amen? We got so many stories within Praise Church of Jesus showing up on 7-mile journeys. I wish we could air them all. It'd be something good that we could do. But there's one story that we were able to capture on video about Jesus showing up on might have been a 7-year journey. It was a long journey, but he shows up. and shows himself and demonstrates who he is to this individual. Why don't you watch the screens? I want you to see it.
I was raised in a traditional Catholic home. I went to Catholic school. I was confirmed Catholic at 14. But mostly it was what everybody was doing, and I wanted to be in the club. And as I grew up, life started to get harder, as life does, and feelings of hopelessness and even suicidal thoughts consumed me. And I remember one day crying out to God, or really demanding of God to show me he was real, to take me out of this situation or fix it. But nothing happened. I got to the point where I was filled with so much anger that I didn't believe he was real anymore. At the time, I would have called myself an atheist, but I was probably more agnostic because I was still searching for something. So for about a decade, I did whatever I wanted to do and found interest in the secular music scene. And I tried for years to write a song, but disappointedly, I was unsuccessful. Still searching for something, I looked at what answers the world had to offer me by reading books on other religions and philosophy. I went back to college thinking there might be somebody out there. There must be somebody out there that has this figured out. And I remember towards the end of a semester in philosophy, I asked the professor, so where are all the answers to all these hard life questions? He literally laughed out loud at me and said, you think there are answers? There's no answers. There's just questions, and each question reveals another beautiful question. And I realized that through science we can know things up to a certain point. But past that point, there has to be belief in an untested and unseen things. It struck me that it was a lot like faith in God. Then I met my wife, and the first thing I said to her was, tell me about this God you believe in. I was looking to pick apart her ignorant, childlike crutch of Christianity. But when I went to church with her, I saw something in the people. I didn't understand. It made no sense. But I thought, that's what I'm searching for. Going to church wasn't easy. There was this internal struggle that I held on to, the anger I carried for so many years. I would literally leave service with a migraine headache because of how much I was struggling internally. Then one Sunday morning, I decided to surrender everything to him, to say he's God and I'm not. And in that moment, he took that constant anger from me. In that same moment, he dropped a song in my heart. And 2 weeks later, I was singing that song in front of the congregation. That thing that I was never able to do on my own, of my own strength, God did in an instant. God loves us enough, he sacrificed his son for us. And all he wants is for us to surrender our lives and burdens to him. I've been through some very hard things since that day, but now I understand how much love he has for me, even though I didn't deserve it. And that keeps my faith, peace, and joy in every situation.